order, I appeal to the honourable member for Blythe Valley to calm himself. Maybe he should take up yoga. It's only Monday, and I know that he'll want to hang on the every word of the Home Secretary. I don't know what he's chuntering about with such good nature from a sedentary position, but it can't be as interesting as what the Home Secretary has to say. Can I just remind members they're supposed to use their mobile devices discreetly and without impairing the decorum of the chamber. I say gently to the honourable member for Chesterfield, he shouldn't stand up seeking to catch my eye while fiddling with his device. Mr. David Anderson. We come now to motion number 3 on e-tabling of written questions.
Object.
The honourable gentleman thinks it's motion 4.
Object.
And anyway, here it says 3. I'm happy to concede the honourable gentleman might be right. The clerk is nodding from a sedentary position. The honourable gentleman is right. It's motion 4. But I don't want to rain on the honourable gentleman's victory parade. But the objection is taken.
And what is this government doing to help people with that? We will have...
There's an excessive noise in the chamber. It would be good if the issues could be aired in an orderly manner, and I'm grateful for the assent to that proposition from so experienced and senior a denizen of the House as the honourable gentleman, the member for Gainsborough, who himself is setting an excellent example which others could usefully follow. Caroline Flint.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I say to the Minister, no, I'm not giving way, because I'm not giving way before I tell... I will not give way. I will not give way before I inform the House what the Minister has told me as to reason why. If he wants to wait a second, tell me if this is wrong. Tell me if this is wrong. Well, let me tell you...
Order, I must say, the Minister of State. He's a rather excitable fellow. No, he's a very... I'm not interested in whether he thinks he can answer now. He'll answer at the point at which the intervention is allowed. The honourable gentleman is a senior member of the government. He needs to cultivate a reputation for being a cerebral figure, not an over-excitable one. Caroline Flint.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. He won't tell us because I quote... He won't tell us... And I quote...
Let me just make the point for the last time. We conduct debate in an orderly way. We do not have people, be they backbenchers, ministers or opposition frontbenchers, yelling out from a sedentary position, encouraged by cheerleaders behind them. It's an unseemly way to operate. The honourable gentleman has registered his interest in offering his views, and doubtless he will have the opportunity in due course. In the meantime, he should sit in statesmanlike quietude, and the House will benefit. Caroline Flint.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I have to say, on neither occasion have they raised that as a concern. But once the cheap seats have piped down, I might finish by saying that if yes, actually, the Right Honourable Lady is extremely expensive. That St Paul's education cost a fortune, didn't it? If he would like to write me a letter, I'll take it up with the Association of British Bookmakers.
I say to the honourable gentleman for Faversham and Mid Kent, for the avoidance of doubt, that the Right Honourable and Learned Lady, the member for Camberwell and Peckham, is neither cheap nor expensive. She's simply priceless. Minister.
In Afghanistan with my right honourable friend.
I apologise interrupting the Minister. I say to the honourable gentleman member for Murray, he's a leader of his party. He's a very senior parliamentarian. It ill behoves him, and it's beneath his dignity for him to yap across the chamber like an indisciplined puppy.
Yeah.
He must conduct himself with decorum. That's what we expect of him. We look up to him, and we want to continue to do so. Minister. Mr. Peter Luff.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For the third time of asking, at 3 successive defence questions, can I ask the Minister when we can expect the publication of the very important and long-delayed Audited Defence Equipment Plan?
Shortly.
Well, the preservation of his good humour on the part of the honourable gentleman is remarkable in the circumstances. Purely on the subject of London Midland trains, I think the member from Edinburgh, Mr. Mark Lazarevic.
If passengers are delayed on London Midland and indeed other lines, they'll be entitled...
But It would be good if we could have a bell fitted behind the Speaker's chair so that every time the word Europe is mentioned, all Pavlov's dogs on the benches over there could start slobbering.
Well, you're the expert on slobbering.
Nothing about that remark, but I leave members to make their own assessment on the question of taste. The Leader of the House.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, you're absolutely right. There is a distinction between what is in order and what is charming, and this was charmless, I think.
The honourable gentleman can't raise the point of order during the division. He can toddle up to the chair and have a chat if he so wishes, and I've got a feeling he'll avail himself of that prerogative. Order. The clerk will now proceed to read the orders of the day. The ayes to the right. Order.
Your MP...
Order. Mr. Ellis, you are a distinguished practising barrister. You wouldn't have behaved like that in the courts. Don't behave like that in this chamber. Calm yourself and be quiet. Learn it, man. Mr. Ed Miliband.
A waste facility in that area.
A lot to get through. We need short, sharp questions and short, sharp answers. I look to Roger Williams for a rapier thrust.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order. Today is a first for me, the first time in my 16 years in the House that I've observed the Honourable Gentleman Member for Islington North occupying the middle ground of the chamber. Mr. Jeremy Corbyn.
I'm obliged to you, Mr. Speaker, and I've always felt that travel broadens the mind.
Mr. Philip Hollowbone.
Number 7, sir.
Mr. Speaker.
The member for Shipley has clearly been undertaking work experience on a farmyard, and we're grateful for that. Mr. Philip Hollowbone, the honourable member for Islington South and Finsbury gesticulating at the honourable member for Shipley in the direction of the opposition benches is a triumph, surely, of optimism over reality. Mr. Raymond Chishley. Mr. Balls, you are barking in the most bellicose fashion at the government benches. I know that whenever you do anything, you don't do it quietly, but a degree of restraint would be appreciated.
Actually, what does the Prime Minister make of the Shadow Chancellor's claim in the Yorkshire Post this weekend that Labour have absolutely, I quote, absolutely not ruled out a referendum, end quote?
But I was about to say...
The Prime Minister, I say to the Honourable Gentleman, the Prime Minister is responsible for many things. He's not responsible for the policy positions of the Shadow Chancellor, and he's certainly not responsible for what quotes are given or attributed to him in the Yorkshire Post. But we'll hear a sentence from the Prime Minister.
All I can do is just reflect on your ruling that the Shadow Chancellor is indeed barking. I think... and I think, just for clarification, we don't mean barking as in Barking and Dagenham. We mean barking as in woof.
Mr. Charlie Elphick.
On the issue of fixed oil gambling terminal.
You must make your question, Michael.
I'm very grateful. Order. Well, we'll just have to extend the session. There is a point about having some courtesy towards the member who's asking a question. I'm sure it's something that members learned at school. Mr. Michael Connaughty. Dr. Julian Huppert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Schools... I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker, that the opposition don't want...
Order. It's very discourteous of the House to issue a collective groan. Notably on the opposition benches, and it's quite inexplicable. I've called the good doctor. Let's hear from the good doctor. Point of order, Mr. Tom Watson.
My apologies to you and to members of the House, Mr. Speaker. I neglected to draw attention to my entry in the register. I'm the author of a book on corruption at News Corporation.
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman. I'm familiar with his book. I have myself read it, but I'm grateful to him. He's put it on the record. The Minister on the Treasury bench is requesting a copy. I don't think the purpose of this exercise was to increase sales of the book, but it may be the inadvertent consequence.
Mr. Speaker, this being Valentine's Day, I'm sure you won't find it inappropriate for me to wish you a very happy Valentine's Day. Though I'm sure I'm not the first person to have done that this morning.
I wish the same to the Secretary of State. Chris White.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You took the words right out of my mouth.
For the department's assumptions.
Order. Both the question and the answer are hopelessly long-winded. We need to get better. Derek Twigg.
Will the ministers now place on the record the fact that recruitment targets are being missed? Because in this important issue, accepting that there is a problem surely is the first step in dealing with the problem.
State.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I would say to the right honourable gentleman that the way we will not increase confidence in the Territorial Army and we will not increase reserve numbers is by arbitrarily cancelling their training, cutting their kit and relegating them to the second division, which is what his government did. I would say to the right honourable...
No, the honourable gentleman is assuming that there's an automatic link between what he says and what the Secretary of State says, which is itself the creation of a notable parliamentary precedent. But it's not for the honourable gentleman to yell from a sedentary position. He asks the question whether he likes the answer or not. He's getting an answer, and he owes the Secretary of State the courtesy of hearing it. Secretary of State.
It's certainly not a precedent I'd noticed before in my 13 years in opposition, Mr. Speaker.
Does the Prime Minister agree with my advice that the people of Eastleigh would be well advised to vote for Maria Hutchins tomorrow?
I want to thank my honourable friend for his hard work and for the ingenious way he managed to get that question in order.
Rhonda, he shouldn't keep yelling from a sedentary position. Sarah Palin. She, at least, is not a candidate in the Eastleigh by-election. The Prime Minister.
If you have any luck in getting the honourable member for Rhonda to shut up, then do let us know how it's done.
I say that the Prime Minister shouldn't bother phoning me. I'll phone him in those circumstances.
Thank you. Thank you very much for that, Mr. Speaker. Perhaps we should...
Member for Denton and Redis, she's shouting more loudly at the Minister than I shouted for Arsenal at the Emirates last Saturday. It really won't do. Minister.
Speaker.
I think the strength and knee muscles of the member for Canterbury now deserve recognition. Mr. Julian Brazier.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Interesting accolade, that. Could I...
The infraction process is surely just a fine. No one's ever paid any of these fines. Please, 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 just say no, tell the Commission to sod off and don't pay the fine.
I say to my honourable friend, if he doesn't mind, I'll just skip the language and I'll stay with the sentiment.
Well, I can say only that I experienced, partly because somebody else was whittering on at me, a moment of deafness, but I have the impression that perhaps something rather tasteless was said, and I trust that the person concerned will wash his or her mouth out without delay. Mr. Ian Lucas. Point of order, Dr. Julian Lewis.
On a different subject, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure you will have noticed the unprecedented numbers of Liberal Democrat honourable members and right honourable members who suddenly appeared as if by magic in the chamber just before the swearing in of a new member, only to evaporate just as rapidly so that normal service could be resumed as soon as possible. Is there any way within the rules of order that I can place this remarkable phenomenon on the record for the benefit of history?
No, but the honourable gentleman's already done so. And what I say to him is that if he is going to raise an obviously bogus point of order, he should at least make the effort to contrive an air of solemnity rather than looking so ostentatiously cheeky as he has just done.
He doesn't know what is someone on remand and someone convicted.
Order! I say to the honourable gentleman, he's noisier in heckling the Secretary of State than he was in heckling me at Essex University 30 years ago. He needs to calm down. Secretary of State.
With respect, Mr. Speaker, his noise covers a complete lack of intelligence. That's what I would want to say. let me just bring something forward. No. The monkeys can jump around, but the noise they make isn't necessarily relevant.
In May 2010, and lots of social ills came about as a result.
Throughout this, there's been too much noise. Frankly, there's too much noise from the opposition benches. And I have to say to the junior health minister, she tends to behave as though every exchange is somehow a conversation with her. If the government had wanted order, if the government had wanted, don't shake her head, if the government wanted to put the honourable lady up to answer, it could have done. It didn't. What I say in all courtesy to the honourable lady is sit there, be quiet, and if you can't do so, leave the chamber. We can manage without you. Minister of State. I take it that the Minister has concluded his remarks. He cannot be accused of doing so with a fanfare of trumpets, it has to be said. But we're grateful to the Minister. He has moved his proposition, and that's clear. We thank him for that. Bob Blackman, not here. Well, the honourable gentleman needs to get into his seat very quickly without further delay. Come along, hurry on. Up on our streets. Mr. Bob Blackman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My apologies, I was held up on transport.
Mike Freer. He's definitely not here. Perhaps he's stuck on London Transport as well. Who knows? Fiona Bruce.
To introduce a significant risk of a catastrophic breakdown in the pay system. And we therefore...
True state, but we've got a lot of questions to get through, and I intend to get through them. Frankly, the initial answer to the question was an abuse of the procedure at topical questions. Answers should be brief. Well, the right honourable gentleman can look at me quizzically, but I'm telling the right honourable gentleman the answer was simply too long for me, too long for the House, and it delayed us unnecessarily. It mustn't happen again. Pauline Latham. Round Donohoe.
I'm grateful to you, Mr. Speaker. I presume that Dr. Livingston was a great educationalist.
I presume.
Who believed, in actual fact, in education. I wonder what his right honourable friend has done to set up the schools industry liaison committees that he promised me some months ago.
Order, this is very tangentially related to the 200th anniversary of the birth of David Livingstone. The honourable gentleman shouldn't be speculating about what Mr. Livingstone would have said, because the fact is he didn't. He wasn't in a position to do so, and he can't do so now. I think we better move on. Mr. Ian Stewart.
Question 2, Mr. Speaker.
Will he make sure that he produces a cross-departmental action plan? Will give his personal commitment and leadership to get Britain cycling?
Order, members on both sides are very discourteous to the good doctor. I can't for the life of me fathom why, whenever I call the good doctor, there are groans. It's very unsatisfactory. The Prime Minister. And I know that the honourable gentleman is dexterous in his use of parliamentary opportunities. I didn't say he was ambidextrous, I said he was dexterous, but I'm always grateful for the sedentary chuntering of the honourable member for Rhondda. Order, we come now to the main business. The clerk will now proceed... I wondered whether the honourable lady was hailing a taxi, but I'm afraid I'm not available for that purpose, and I'm happy to respond to her attempted point of order. Point of order, Caroline Lucas.
I'm very grateful to you, Mr. Speaker.
Order. The question is that motion 31 be agreed to. As are of that opinion, say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. Motion number 8, Church of England. General Synod measures. Not a matter to be moved by a whip.
Certainly not.
But by Sir Tony. Thank you. The question is as on the order paper. As many as have their opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Similarly, we're grateful to the Minister of State at the Ministry of Defence for his sedentary observation. The question is as on the order paper. As many as have their opinion say aye. Aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Motion number 10. A sedentary hallelujah from the whip on duty, to whom we're obliged.
Not guilty. Not guilty. It was me.
Motion number 10.
Correct the record.
Point of order from the Honourable Member for New Forest East, but uttered sotto voce, so I didn't hear it. Motion number 10, business of the House motion, whip to move. The Honourable Lady is rising, but I think she's already asked her question. I'm sure she hasn't forgotten that she asked her question. And we haven't forgotten the answer either. Order. Mr. Zahawi, you have already intervened with some gusto, but I would ask you to behave in a seemly manner, as the people of Stratford-upon-Avon would expect, and are themselves wont to do. Mr. Ed Balls, it's always helpful if members look at the question on the order paper and ask a coherent supplementary that relates to it rather than to something else. So that would be a helpful part of the learning curve for the honourable member for Weaver Vale. Mr. Tom Greatrix.
Question 2, Mr. Speaker.
Me again. It's in here somewhere. None. No. There's a bit more. The Crown Prosecution Service are not involved in the use of community resolutions, which are out-of-court disposals that enable a police officer to deal proportionately with appropriate offences in a timely and transparent manner.
I must say the initial answer was the shortest I've ever heard, especially from a lawyer. Kerry McCarthy. Order. There are far too many very noisy conversations. Ministers on the Treasury bench can scarcely hear the questions, and I remind the House we're discussing the security situation in Northern Ireland. Some basic manners and displays of respect would, I think, be appreciated, not least in Northern Ireland. Secretary of State. That's a month.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Many village halls like that in East Brent, in my patch, applied for big lottery awards for all funding to install PV solar panels using the feed-in tariffs as an invaluable source of income to make repayments on the loans to complete their projects. It's a feature of the lottery that it's not funded by government but by individuals, and that grant funding is made completely independent of government, as is stated on the website and in their literature. Ofgem seems to have decided in February 2013 that lottery funding is state...
For the order. It's my ambition in this Parliament to educate the honourable lady that the second sentence should usually end with a question mark. That's what we want.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ofgem's decided this is state aid.
It's not working.
Ofgem, no, it is, sir. I must explain myself. Ofgem is state aid. Can I ask the Secretary of State to investigate Ofgem's administration of the scheme and for the lack of information provided to everybody involved, so that it reverses its decision that lottery money is state aid?
Well, my honourable friend is a doughty campaigner for her constituents in villages of members, and I hope we can look at it in due course.
The Secretary of State doesn't have to compete with backbenchers. There's no obligation for the answer to be as long as the question. Mr. Andrew Gwynn. Margot James.
I'm so sorry, Mr. Speaker. I was just getting up to leave the chamber.
Go on, answer it. We're sorry the honourable lady is taking her leave, but we'll hear from her on other occasions. No, the honourable lady has nothing for which to apologise. I mistakenly thought she was trying to contribute. She should take her leave. We'll give her a cheer. And we'll hear from her again soon. She's a very regular contributor. Mr. Philip Holloway.
It has fallen fastest in the northwest of our country.
Dr. Julian Huppert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is National Carers Week. Will the Prime Minister join me in paying tribute to...
Order! If the session has to be extended to accommodate the democratic rights of members, it will be extended. The honourable gentleman will, I repeat, will be heard. Dr. Huppert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
That I am very aware of their power. I am also very aware that they have access, for whatever reason, to higher levels at number 10 than do I. Is that not a disgraceful comment? The way this government
The honourable gentleman's question, which refers to a distinguished constituent of mine, suffered from the disadvantage of being too long. The Prime Minister.
Both from
the Chief Executive of Enterprise Inns and the Chief Executive of the lobbying organisation for the pubcos, the BBPA, 2 MPs onto the Select Committee.
Order. The Honourable Gentleman will resume his seat. Topical questions must be brief. The Honourable Gentleman had one opportunity already. There's a lot to get through and other colleagues to consider. Minister.
I have to say to the honourable gentleman, the problem with the last government's legacy is because you left a massive debt burden and a massive deficit, this government has had to take action to deal with it. Now, as I said, the best way to get...
Order. I'm very grateful to the Prime Minister. I didn't leave any debt burden and we'll concentrate on the policies of the government, not the... Order! Order! Nothing further required. We'll move on. Mr Graham Brady.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.
Sir Tony Baldry.
As my honourable friend considered, this question seriously underestimates the value of extras and walk-on parts in the theatre and the Palace of Varieties. I mean, one needs walk-on parts to swell a progress, start a scene or two, deferential, glad to be of use. And isn't one of the problems with too many theatre troupes that everyone wants to play the role of Hamlet, and that is just not possible?
It wasn't autobiographical in any way. Minister.
I concur with my right honourable friend that not everyone can be Hamlet, Mr Speaker.
I'm delighted that it's working in partnership with Watford Football Club, which is in fact the team my dad supports. So maybe he would be keen to visit the centre.
It's a new departure for members of the Treasury bench to subcontract ministerial visits to their parents. Who knows what else is in store? Justin Tomlinson.
The point I was making, which I'm grateful to the right honourable gentleman, but his own front bench will not. I'm sorry, I'm not giving way again.
Oh dear, the Leader of the House has made it clear he's not giving way. The Honourable Gentleman's got a sort of beatific smile in his face, but the Honourable Gentleman's been in the House for 34 years. He knows you can't make your point by intervention if the person on his feet or her feet is not giving way. The Honourable Gentleman chunters from a sedentary position that he was being helpful. I think his concept of helpfulness is not necessarily universally shared. The Leader of the House, Mr Andrew Lansley.
Grateful, Mr Speaker.
They want to borrow less by borrowing more. They want to spend less by spending more. They want to cap welfare by spending more on welfare. No wonder it's not just people at Wimbledon saying new balls, please.
Order! In congratulating the Honourable Gentleman on his birthday, I call Mr David Winnick.
I certainly wouldn't suggest a vote on it, Mr Speaker.
We're going to spend £745 billion in 2015. What is he going to spend? Does he match those plans or not? Just hands up on the Labour benches who wants to match our spending plans. On Saturday, the Labour leader...
Order. Can I just say... Order. No help from the Honourable Gentleman is required. He wouldn't have the foggiest idea where to start. Let me just say to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, there is a way in which these matters are handled, and it's not by the Minister responding to questions, posing a series of questions. It's in breach of parliamentary protocol, it's not proper, and it must stop straight away. And others, including at the very highest level, ought to take note of that for future weeks. Let's be clear about it. The Chancellor.
Mr Speaker.
But he still said that he saw some additional investment coming in through private investment. Perhaps...
We don't need these constant sedentary interventions from the Minister of State. The message is clear and simple. Be quiet, man. Sheila Gilmore.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.
This government remains committed.
There's a very disorderly atmosphere in the House. Mr Doherty, you're in a very jolly frame of mind, but it would be greatly for your benefit and that of the House if your jollification could be perhaps a tad more restrained. The Chief Secretary.
He asked about our figures on investment. We've added £20 billion of investment at every fiscal event since the 2010 spending...
Order. Can I just say that the length of the answer is improper, regardless of its content. The way in which a minister replies to questioning is a matter for him, and he is at liberty to refer to material. But the right honourable gentleman mustn't dilate in his answer. And if it were to become effectively a second statement, the Chief Secretary might have some difficulty retaining the attention of the House. The Chief Secretary.
Well, thank you for that advice, Mr. Speaker. I was merely attempting to answer the inaccurate account of the facts on investment that was given by the member opposite.
We are going to make changes that they themselves recommended, that they themselves said were necessary, to take a financial decision to sort out a mess they left behind. Out where they stand.
I say the honourable member for Kingston upon Hull, he shouldn't keep prating noisily from a sedentary position. When he was practising at the bar, he wouldn't have behaved like that in the courts. Due decorum should be observed by the honourable gentleman. Debbie Abrahams.
And can I just say to my own friend, I just don't think one should be too prescriptive here. It shouldn't be for the state to tell me whether I own 2 pugs or 4 pugs, if I want to own a number of pugs, providing those pugs behave themselves properly.
Well, I think the honourable gentleman has exactly stated the position, and irrespective of the number of pugs he has in his possession, I have to say the key is whether he is a responsible owner of those dogs, whether he has them under proper control, and whether they represent a danger to himself and his neighbours.
It would be a bit worrying if the Second Church Estates Commissioner of all people were other than a responsible owner. Mr. John Mann. The usual very low grade, very substandard, very unnecessary heckling. The session has to run longer, it has to run longer. Let's try to observe some decorum which the public can respect. Mr. Ed Miliband. Richard Drax.
Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman wanted to be called. I've called him. You should be.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, very much indeed. I'm most grateful to you.
Order. Statement. The Secretary of State for Defence. We need an orderly House, both because that's right in itself and because it will be of interest in light of the coverage of this matter to discover whether the Secretary of State has anything to say in the House that we've not already heard outside. We look forward to it. Mr. Secretary Hammond. I gather I've just been informed and seen evidence for myself that the oral statement, or copies thereof, are now being distributed around the chamber in what is frankly a rather unedifying spectacle. And I do have, in all sincerity and candour, to say to the Secretary of State that, as he will know, the content of statements is not a matter for me and I take no view of them, but the administration of this matter has been woefully inadequate and frankly utterly incompetent. I've not known a worse example during my tenure as Speaker. Although the Secretary of State has expressed himself in his usual rather understated terms, I hope he genuinely does feel some sense of embarrassment and contrition at what has been a total mishandling by his department, for which the right honourable gentleman is solely responsible. It's as simple as that. Sir Mingus Campbell.
And will therefore be reimbursed for the travel costs in that journey.
Well, there's a sort of sedentary chant of Kilmarnock, but order. The honourable gentleman's an eager beaver. Secretary of State's given his reply. If he decides he wants to say anything further in response to a subsequent question, Secretary of State's well able to do that. Order. Secretary of State wish to say it now.
Has just come to me, Mr. Speaker. Kilmarnock is a new Army Reserve unit, will be moving into Kilmarnock on an existing site, which will be reopening to accommodate it.
To Croydon, which is 190 miles away.
The honourable gentleman has availed himself, which he had no right to do, availed himself of the opportunity to ask 4 questions, but I think he'll get 1 answer.
I'm grateful to the honourable gentleman, and having to select between the 4 questions, I'm going to address the RMLY question because I know there will be other members that are interested in that.
Improved rail links. It's interesting the honourable gentleman is chuntering, I think is the right word, from the back benches. He seems to be able to get away with it in a way others can't.
The Minister will resume his seat. Let me be clear and explicit. There is a thing about pots and kettles. It's a point so obvious that I think it's within the comprehension of the Minister of State, who should now continue uninterrupted with his speech.
Well, we are, as I said, providing capacity for an extra 140 commuter journeys into our major cities. I was also rather surprised, as he is chuntering, that he doesn't seem to be in agreement with, of course, his leader.
The point, actually, the honourable gentleman wasn't chuntering. There are many people who do chunter in the House, in some cases extremely noisily, and an exemplar of that approach is the right honourable gentleman. So I would suggest in his own best interest, of which he's not always the most appropriate guardian, that further references to chuntering by him might seem singularly inappropriate. Continue.
Well, let's move on. We are well on the way to delivering a new high-speed railway for Britain. It has been made quite clear, if the honourable gentleman would keep quiet and listen, he will get the answer. It has been quite clear, it obviously causes amusement in every area of the chamber.
The Minister of State, he's a slow learner, he's a late developer, but he's got to try to grasp the point. It ill behoves a right honourable gentleman who regularly shouts and hollers and chunters and accuses other people of all sorts of things from a sedentary position to make something of the fact that somebody mutters for a sedentary position. What I very gently advise the Minister is try to raise the game and operate at the level of events. Minister of State, continue with the speech and the reading thereof.
As I was saying in answer to the honourable lady's contribution...
Mr. Robert Halfon.
Thank you, Mr. My constituents welcome the scrapping of the last government's guide.
I don't know why the honourable gentleman has resumed his seat. I was merely looking at him and listening attentively, as always.
Anything to catch your eye, Mr.
Say to the Secretary of State, I thought the honourable gentleman was the man in the mustard suit, but the clerk, who is the fount of all wisdom, advises me that its colour is tangerine. And Mrs. Sharon Hodgson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the last Labour government.
Order, Mr. Robertson, I don't know if you've consumed a high-energy breakfast or something, but you seem to be in hyperbolic mode. What we want is your statesman-like pose. Calm yourself, man, and get a grip. Home Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Let's try him on another test. I say...
Order! The question must be heard. And people that I might have thought about calling to ask a question, who are shouting from a sedentary position, might just as well leave the chamber. Mr. Ed Miliband.
I say this as well.
And I might... Can I just say to the honourable gentleman, member for Dunfermline and West Fife, that he shouldn't continue to chunter noisily from a sedentary position and to gesticulate as well. It's unseemly and it's not statesmanlike in the way that I aspire for him to be. We have a lot of business to get through, and we will make speedier progress if we have brief contributions and some order. The leader.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. East Lancashire NHS Trust.
Cannot have a running commentary on the statement as it is delivered. And I remind the House that last Wednesday, when there were scenes of grave disorder manifested by members on both sides of the House, the public reaction to that exceptionally bad behaviour was understandably negative. I appeal to honourable and right honourable members on both sides of the chamber to show courtesy and restraint. They can rely upon me to protect their interests if they were here on time for the statement, to question the Secretary of State. But the statement must be heard. Secretary of State.
From Mid-Staffs, who lost a relative. She said that the Shadow Secretary of State was trying to defend the indefensible.
Order, it's very difficult to imagine how anyone can hear these exchanges. The content of questions and answers is to be determined by members, but I gently remind the House, A, of the need for good order, and B, that this is not a debate. There will be debates. It's not a debate. It's a statement upon which there is questioning, to which there is then a ministerial answer. It's not an opportunity for general speechifying, but for responses to specific questions. Done with economy, so that I can accommodate all interested colleagues. The Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I rated the hospital as good. And within 4 weeks, ministers were shamed into launching an investigation into high mortality rates.
Order. I've tried to explain the position calmly, and I shall do so once more. I think the Secretary of State will appreciate that he has been asked questions about present arrangements to which we need pithy replies, not a lengthy statement about events of the past before he had responsibility. We cannot have that. If that's what he's planning to read out, we'll simply move on. A brief conclusion to his answer, I think, is now required and sought by the House. The Secretary of State.
So, Mr. Speaker, let me briefly take the final 2 points raised by the right honourable gentleman.
How they should behave come from a different angle. My second point.
I apologise for interrupting. I say to the right honourable gentleman member for Rother Valley, he's an illustrious figure in the House. He holds an extremely important position as chair of the Standards and Privileges Committee, and he must therefore, I know he feels extremely strongly about these matters, but he mustn't compete with other members for the title of Chunterer-in-Chief. Minister of State.
Making sure that basic protections do remain in place for workers, of course that's important for a functioning economy too.
No. In conformity with long-standing convention, the honourable member for Rugby can't come in a second time on substantive questions. The honourable gentleman's enthusiasm and appetite are appreciated, and he can try his luck at topical questions. Tom Blenkinsop.
There is a specific exemption in Schedule 1. I think if the honourable gentleman were less insistent, he might listen more.
I just politely suggest to the House that in terms of the orderly conduct of debate, it's probably as well if the leader responds to one intervention before being aggressively exhorted to take another. The Leader of the House.
Right as ever, Mr. Speaker.
John Mann! Is it not the case that real... Is it not the case...
Order. The honourable gentleman is something of an exotic creature in the House, and I think that excites the interest on government benches, but I do wish to hear what the honourable gentleman has to say, and he must be heard. Mr. Mann.
Is it not the case...
Mr. Speaker, can I start by reminding the House the importance of universal credit? The universal credit is a major and challenging reform, transform the...
Order, just before the Secretary of State develops. The exchanges will run on, but I say very gently to the right honourable gentleman that the proper form in these matters is to stick to the urgent question in the terms submitted. It's not appropriate for a member to refine or adjust or spin the terminology of the question. So we really must stick to the terms. I'm not impugning the integrity of the right honourable gentleman, which No, I'm not doing anything of the kind. But I think it is... What I'm saying is I think that the right honourable gentleman has behaved in a mildly cheeky manner. And I hope he won't do that again. Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, we would never accuse the right honourable gentleman of being less than cheeky, or for that matter, ever attempting to spin anything, but I stand by your judgment. A cheeky spinner he is. Anyway, Mr. Speaker, I acted to make sure the changes were made early to deliver the programme on time and in budget.
Order. I appreciate there's much interest, but 25 members have questioned the Secretary of State. We must now move on, because the House is used to the situation in which virtually everybody gets in, because that's the way I like to play it. I must say, particularly to new members, didn't used to be like that at all. It usually is, but I have to make a judgment about the time that we have available. We have business question, we have a statement on legal aid, and we then have debates under the auspices of the Backbench Business Committee. All of these matters can be rehearsed again in the future, and doubtless they will be. Business question, Angela Eagle.
But could my honourable friend, the Leader of the House, give some thought to the possibility of affording an opportunity to members of the House to subscribe to a decent christening present for the young Prince George of Cambridge, such as a really good, something he could use in later childhood, such as a really good cricket bat?
Can I offer a manuscript amendment, namely a tennis racket? Leader of the House.
Or possibly both.
Mr. Speaker, I can feel a coat of arms coming on cross. I appreciate the honourable gentleman's recognition of that joke.
Order. We come now to the main business. Point of order, Mr. Barry Sherman.
During the very important, urgent statement this morning from the Secretary of State Working Pensions, he at one stage said, and he did not tell me the truth. Many of us on this side of the House couldn't quite work out which person the Secretary of State was particularly alluding to. This could lead to a very great injustice to a particular person. Is there any way that you, Mr. Speaker, could clear this up?
I'm a little concerned that the honourable gentleman has a sense of my psychic quality which is not matched by the reality. I cannot possibly know who the Secretary of State had in mind. The honourable gentleman refers to a particular person who might have been subject to a grave injustice. It has to be said that the particular person, if there is such, is unlikely to be aware of this fact if he or she was not identified by the Secretary of State. No, I don't think there's need at this stage for a further point of order. What I would say to the honourable gentleman is that I wish to offer him practical advice. And my advice to the honourable gentleman, the member for Huddersfield, is that he should write to the Secretary of State and ask the Secretary of State who, if anyone, the Secretary of State had in mind. If that approach is unavailing, and the honourable gentleman wishes to pursue the matter further, I rather suspect that he will require no encouragement from me to do just that.
It is worth, as we're talking about geology, mentioning that the great father of geology, Mr. Smith, started all his work in North East Somerset in a village of High Littleton. When going down in a mine shaft, he saw the different layers of the earth and worked out.
I'm all agog at the racy and intoxicating oration that the honourable gentleman is delivering to the House, but I have simply two concerns. First, if the honourable gentleman leads a lengthy sojourn, either accompanied or unaccompanied, in the terms that he describes, he may be sorely missed in North East Somerset. And secondly, I feel sure that ere long, notwithstanding the quite legendary eloquence that the honourable gentleman has thus far deployed, he will turn his attention to the contents of the deep-sea mining bill itself. Mr. Jacob Rees-Mogg.
Because so many other members are keen to speak in this debate, I am going to keep my remarks short. I know the benches are not currently filled, but people are waiting in their offices to come down here, racing down the moment the Minister has said a few words. Such is their excitement to talk.
Mr. Speaker, following on from my honourable member for Kettering's question, could we have a statement from the Leader of the House confirming that in a division of this House it would be not allowed for a member to cover their face? In fact, they have to raise their head and lower it as they go through the division of it.
Well, of course, my honourable friend raises the point that technically is a matter for the Speaker and not a matter for me as Leader of the House. I don't think we need a debate. I think the rules of the House are clear, and if the Speaker were to advise me, unless the Speaker advised me otherwise, I think it is very clear that a member must make themselves known to the tellers in a way that identifies themselves in that way.
I think we are clear on that point. There is no requirement for a debate on the matter, but we're grateful, as always, to the honourable member for Wellingborough. Order. Order.
The ayes to the right, 0. The noes to the left, 46.
Much scope for improved nodding. The ayes to the right, 0. The noes to the left, 46. So the noes have it. The noes have it. Unlock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Schools across Britain recently celebrated World Milk Day, produced by cattle, Mr. Speaker. Something I saw for myself when I visited Pavilion Nursery School in Attleborough, mid-Norfolk. I'm sure all sides of the House applaud the initiative as a key opportunity to highlight the benefits of milk as the health drink, but also the enormous pressures facing the UK dairy sector, not least the threat of TB in cattle. Can I ask my right honourable friends what steps he'll take to ensure the dairy market is working properly for consumers, processors and farmers?
Extraordinarily strained attempt on the part of the honourable gentleman to shoehorn his own personal preoccupations into question number 2. But the Secretary of State is a dexterous fellow, and I dare say he can respond pithily.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
About the increase in the use of food banks. And I'd like to report to the House that the Church of England's Mission and Public Affairs team, together with Oxfam and the Child Poverty Action Group, are examining the underlying reasons for the rapid growth in the use of food banks and recommend changes in policy and practice that would help to reduce the use of food banks in the longer term.
Yes, I won't repeat what the honourable member for Bolsover has just said from a sedentary position. The Second Church of State Commissioner is an extremely distinguished member, but he is not what was said of him from a sedentary position.
Speaker, we weren't discussing such an important subject as food banks. I would just comment to the honourable gentleman that one of the great things about this place, one has to have humility. And ever since I received my K, the family at home now know me as Circumference Hippo, so I wouldn't worry too much about it.
We appreciate that from the honourable gentleman and his unfailing sense of humour. Mr. Barry Shearman.
Number 4.
Order, order. Questions to the Secretary of State for Energy and Climate Change. Mr. Ian Lucas.
Number 1, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm taking many steps to help that come under 3 broad categories.
You say he's seeking to group this question with others, is he not? Perhaps he can advise the House of that.
So with your permission and the petition of the House, I'd like to group this question with several other questions.
6 and 18. I understand the concept of the broad brush, but it can be taken a bit far. We need greater specificity. 6 and 18.
As always, Mr. Speaker, I'm very grateful for your advice. I'm sure the House is too. So I start again, Mr. Speaker.
And I have to say we are making great progress under this government and picking up the slack from the last.
Order. The honourable gentleman is wittering away from a sedentary position. Meanwhile, the member for Mid Sussex is chuntering about the merits of cricket bats. I've not yet had the pleasure of observing the honourable gentleman bat, but I feel sure that that delight awaits me in due course. Mr. Bill Wiggin. Mr. Andrew Bridgen.
Speaker, does my right honourable friend agree that this urgent question demonstrates the political dogma with regard to education of the party opposite, using one single failing free school to criticise all free schools, and given, Mr. Speaker, that the comprehensive school I attended is now sadly in special measures, does my right honourable friend think it's very telling that the party opposite are not asking questions?
Gentleman will resume his seat. I must have told the honourable gentleman over 3.5 years a score of times, and I now tell him for the 21st time, questions must be about the policy of the government, not that of the opposition, nor is this an occasion for general dilation by members upon their own educational experiences. The urgent question is narrowly focused on a particular school. It is with that, and with that alone, that we are concerned. I hope my point has now finally registered with the honourable gentleman. Mr. Peter Bone. Point of order, Mr. Andrew Bridgen.
Mr. Speaker, last Thursday during urgent questions, I gave you cause to call my question out of order, and I would like to apologise for that. However, you went on to state that it was the 21st time since 2010 that you had to do this. The Commons Library informs me that Thursday was, in fact, the second time since 2010 I've officially had a question called out of order. Mr. Speaker, I know that on 5 other occasions you've had to give me the benefit of your advice and experience with regard to my questioning in the chamber, and I would thank you for that. But even all of this, only come to 7 times, not 21, and represent about 1 in every 200 of my contributions in this chamber. Mr. Speaker, can we put the record straight, please?
To help the honourable gentleman, I would say to the honourable gentleman there's quite an old piece of advice which is usually regarded as sagacious, and that is when in a hole, stop digging. I am grateful to the honourable gentleman for his point of order, genuinely so, and for his courtesy in giving me advance notice of what I know he judges to be its import. Although I'm not sure that it is strictly a point of order, I'm very happy to help the honourable gentleman in his effort to protect his reputation. I acknowledge that in my anxiety to help the honourable gentleman last Thursday, I lured myself into multiplying by 3 the number of times on which I've had occasion to adjust his line of questioning. It wasn't, as he rightly says, 21, it's just that it felt like it. I'm happy not only to allow the correction to lie upon the record, but also to assure the honourable gentleman of my hope and confidence that his score will never reach double figures. We'll leave it there for now. And I thank the honourable gentleman for the good humour that he's shown in this matter.
And I'm afraid that didn't happen under the last government. This is what the head of
I've told the Secretary of State privately before, and I say it publicly now, that if the right honourable gentleman intends to devote a part of his answer to talking about what happened under the last government, he can abandon that plan now and resume his seat. I suggest he resumes his seat. Mr. Tom Clark.
Can the Prime Minister tell us what's the difference between his...
Order. Can I just say to the Prime Minister's PPS, his role is to nod his head in the appropriate places and to fetch and carry notes. No noise required. Mr. Ed Miliband.
Mr. Speaker,
too weak to stand up to the Shadow Chancellor on 8-2.
Order! Mr. Gwynne! Recover your composure, man. You're wholly out of control. The Prime Minister.
Can we have a situation where those of us whose grandfathers fought in the First World War with the Highlandite infantry, and our great-grandfathers fought with the Gordon Highlanders, and who consider ourselves in large parts to be Scots, and who consider Scotland in part to be home, can we have a vote in the referendum as well?
That is a very ingenious question, but it suffers from the disadvantage of being entirely unrelated to question 2. Katie Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order! Too much noise. It had better stop, or the process will take longer. I say to those who can't grow up, try. Ed Miliband.
The high speed of High Speed 2 will depend on the high technology of a new generation of civil engineers, mechanical engineers, electrical engineers and many others. So can I challenge a member of the ministerial front bench to come upstairs with me after question time to the Bloodhound Supersonic Car Simulator, see if they can beat the very credible speed of the member for Birmingham Northfield, and learn also what the project is doing to inspire a new generation of children about the opportunities for British engineering.
I'm sure an invitation to come upstairs beats an invitation to come outside. Mr. Steve Rotherham.
The staff employed in this House are all in receipt of at least the London living wage.
Order. People who work in the House of Commons are indeed paid the living wage. The right honourable gentleman, the Leader of the House, is factual. Order! Order! The Leader of the House is correct in what he said. That is the beginning and the end of it. Mr. Philip Davis.
Sir Bob Russell, how many nuclear weapons does Israel have?
Well, it was 3 years ago, Mr. Speaker, it was my initiative to declare for the first time the number of nuclear warheads possessed by the United Kingdom. But I'm not in a position to declare the number possessed by any other country other than the United Kingdom.
There's no obligation on the Foreign Secretary to have a guess, especially as the statement is about Iran and Syria. So the honourable gentleman, even by his own standards, has been exceptionally cheeky. Mr. Mark Durkan.
Will the Minister now have a change of heart and give that building back to the community of Stoke-on-Trent?
Stretch the elastic beyond snapping point. The question was broadened by the content of the Minister's answer, but not broadened beyond the prison estate. That's the subject matter with which we're dealing at the moment. but the honourable gentleman is very visible, courtesy of his moustache, so he can try his luck later. Mr. Philip Holloway.
Speaker, I'm a little hurt that you haven't seen fit to mention my moustache. But it's been there a while, I have to say.
Or whether it needs to wait for a majority Conservative government, I suspect we'll discover then.
Dr. Pugh.
Number 20. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Number 20.
You're not on time. You're not on budget, are you?
I'm always on time. Let's hear from the Secretary of State.
Mr. Speaker, I say not only are you on time, but you are always on budget.
The terms are a bit too narrow to admit of Birmingham Edgbaston on this occasion. I am sure, yes. We will always try to catch the honourable lady later. There's a bit of a distance between Devon and Cornwall and Birmingham Edgbaston. Mr. Philip Hollowbone.
Yes, sir.
It looks as though I have to arbitrate the sibling rivalry, and on this occasion it will be little brother. Mr. Keith Vaz.
A very good choice, Mr. Speaker.
I note there's notable interest in this subject, which I'm keen to accommodate, but I'm also keen to move on to the next business shortly after 1 o'clock. I say that now because there is a premium upon brevity, which I know will be observed by the right honourable gentleman, the member for Blackburn, Mr. Jack Straw.
It will now, Mr. Speaker.
Eliza Pierce!
The housing... Oi.
Order! The honourable lady has a right to put her question and to be heard when she does so. And that's what's going to happen. Teresa Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Online and physical provision of services has been merged in many industries. If you go into Asda, you can order online and collect at the physical bricks and mortar. You can go to M&S and go into their clothing department and order your boxer shorts online for delivery. So the on and offline world has merged in a number of environments, and those environments, I hope, Mr. Speaker, I'm entertaining you clearly, but hopefully that's not advertising for those two institutions.
Oh, I'm certainly not accusing the honourable gentleman of advertising for one moment. It's always of great interest to the House to learn about the honourable gentleman's personal arrangements. Mr. James Dudridge.
I thank the honourable member. I did for one moment fear I was getting my knickers in a twist.
Because when it comes to the economy, when it comes to jobs, when it comes to Europe, all the arguments are for staying together.
For future reference, Mr. McNeill, you shouldn't be yapping at the Prime Minister like an overexcited puppy dog. It's unseemly. You can do a lot better if you try. Mary MacLeod.
He really ought to talk to the fuel poverty lobby groups.
Order. The honourable member for Blaydon is now squawking like a parrot with indigestion. I think he must calm himself.
After the slowest recovery for over 100 years.
Order. However long it takes, the response... Order! Mr. Morris, I don't require your assistance. Calm down. Take up yoga, whatever is necessary. However long it takes, the response, like the statement, will be heard. The sooner members upon both sides of the House grasp that very simple fact, so much the better. Mr. Ed Balls.
Mr. Speaker.
I'll tell him what happened.
Order, members can calm down. I've said it before, some people are slow learners. As long as it takes As long as it takes, we'll go on so they can shout and scream and bawl in the most juvenile manner, but we'll just keep going. Ed Miliband.
I'll tell him what happened.
Well, Mr. Speaker, if you visit Stafford Prison, you could not help but be impressed by the work that's been done on the team on the ground of bringing valuable contracts and work experience into the prison. Of course, our team centrally that looks for opportunities to bring work into prisons will be working with Stafford and other prisons to ensure that we do as much as we can to keep prisoners active.
I did visit the prison myself, I must tell the Secretary of State, but it was sadly 13 years ago. I'm sure it's even better now than it was then. Yet, no, I did so in my capacity as a shadow minister. Dr. John Pugh.
22, Mr. Speaker.
The whole House is relieved to hear that, Mr. Speaker.
Gisela Stewart.
I'm not sure I derive much comfort that the expansion of Birmingham may be decided in 2050, by which time I'll be 95 years old. However, can I suggest something to Secretary of State which he could do now?
I'm not sure I'm going to make a comment on the first part of the Honourable Lady's question. It might not be the thing to do from the dispatch box, but...
The Chair has to be very careful in these matters, but I must say I found the age-related facet of the Honourable Lady's question utterly implausible. Mr. Andrew Bridgen.
Speaker.
Mr. Kevin Brennan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Could we have a debate about the recesses we have in this House and when we return? We talked earlier about the September sitting. Isn't it ludicrous we come back for 2 weeks, then we have party conferences for 3 weeks, then we come back again? Couldn't we debate moving the party conferences into the early part of September so we can have a clear run-through in this House? A Merry Christmas.
And a Merry Christmas to him too. I don't think it's ludicrous. I think it's, as it were, conventional. But if I may, we will simply take it away, and these are things we regularly look at. But I don't hold out any immediate promise to him.
I've always thought the party conferences could perfectly well take place at weekends. I can't for the life of me see why we have to go away from our main place of work for this rather self-indulgent exercise. But I wouldn't wish to express any views that could be considered to be controversial. Mr. Julian Sturdy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order. The fact that the Honourable Gentleman, the member for Huddersfield, sought to intervene on the chair of the Transport Select Committee when I had at the outset indicated that the procedure was analogous to that of a ministerial statement in which honourable members should not intervene but rather wait their turn, suggests to me that the honourable gentleman was not present at the outset to hear my wise words. Moreover, I have since been advised that the honourable gentleman did indeed beetle into the chamber a couple of minutes into the honourable lady's statement, but the concepts of the honourable gentleman on the one hand and brass neck on the other are by no means unrelated. In a spirit of Christmas generosity, on this one occasion I shall allow the honourable gentleman to put his question, which I think he wants to hear and which he imagines that perhaps the House also might wish to hear. Mr. Barry Shearman.
Mr. Speaker, my office is a long way from here and I did run as fast as I could. My apologies to you and to to my honourable friend, who she knows I'm a great admirer of hers and the work of her select committee and select committees in general. She also knows that